לאמיתה של תורה, כתוב בגמרא בברכות, 3 דברים נקנים בייסורים, תורה וארץ ישראל ועולם הבא. So there's so much Shiur coming here and going through. I have to מכוון מאוד לאמיתה של תורה to justify the Shiur that you people went through. I apologize. The lack of organization on our part. Earlier today, when I was trying to organize my thoughts as to what to speak about today, I had a certain thought, and I'd like to start off with that and somewhat address it as an underlying issue, which we'll start off with, and hopefully, if I have enough time, come back to it at the end. I do not like the term chiloni. It has a lot of connotations I don't identify with, but I would like to, for a second, to talk about not any chiloni person, but the chiloni worldview. Okay? Not talking about people, talking about a worldview. Which means a person who wears glasses through which what he sees is chol, that's his worldview. Kol ha-metziut hi chol. So I thought to myself that in a sense, his life is much, much easier than for many of us, on many different levels, but in the sense that there is a certain sense of a wave of sameness that is poured over his entire life. What do I mean by that? In contrast to that, anybody who lives somewhat a life of Kedusha is constantly challenged with a constant changing or transitions between worlds. Meaning, he's always moving from Chol to Kodesh, from Kodesh to Chol. From Shachris to going out of Shul. Work, meaning the rest of the day in the working world, and then all of a sudden he's stopping in the middle for Mincha. The relationship between work and then having a chavruta. Chavruta and then coming home to whatever extent, we'll put it under the category of chol. Words of divrei sichat chulin, as Chazal call it, as opposed to words of kedusha. These are transitions which are not so easy and are very challenging, especially the day one leaves yeshiva, which is, it's the case for most people here, and you have to deal with the world outside, whether it's Misrat HaPnim, and whether it's the doctor, and whether it's work and a boss, and even many aspects of home. Where what's easy when we are in yeshiva, that what gives a lot of exhilaration and motivation is the fact that I'm constantly immersed in Kodesh, and there's nothing else. And to be able to get to a new stage where Kodesh and Chol are chambers in my life, rooms, so to speak, that I have to constantly switch in between, that's not at all easy. And it's true in general for people who leave yeshiva into the world of Chol. And it's also true in the sense of going into the days, and that's maybe one of our biggest internal challenges, going into the days, the very elevated days, הימים המרוממים והנשגבים של ראש השנה, 10 ימי תשובה ויום הכיפורים, where we know already that we're already experienced enough and old enough. We're not trying to beg people to think this year on Rosh Hashanah we'll see the light and that's it for the rest of our life. We won't have any challenges. We're a little more experienced and mature and adult than that, and we know that on the one hand we're going into very elevated and very intense days of Otzmat HaKodesh, intensity of Kodesh, and we know that they're going to be, whether right after Yom Kippur, or during a certain Yom Tshuva, or for sure, once we Cheshvan, or the days after Simchas Torah kick in, go back to routine and back to all those challenges, and therefore, one of the most common issues you hear, and that one of the most common issues with ourselves, like with the validity of tshuva, the extent of tshuva, is it real, is it a game? Rabina, in his own style, addresses it every year when he speaks to the boys on Rosh Hashanah. The issue, the truth is not at all any side issue to us Jews. In a sense, it's everything that the Havaya of a Jew in Olam Hazeh is about. In the Lashon of the Zohar, the many sources quoted, and I'm sure here many are familiar with the concept, and often quoted very much in Chassidut, which it's a very underlying theme in Chassidut, the will of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ritzono shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, lishkon b'tachtonim, that is to dwell down in the lowest of worlds, and that is in Olam Hazeh. That's the biggest challenge of God, quote unquote, the biggest challenge of His worlds, to be able to create a world of Olam Hazeh, with all that that entails, that's able to contain a Kadosh Baruch Hu, Kedusha, in it. Or, in the Kabbalistic terminology, some people often say this, some people less often say it, but the concept of L'Shem Yichud, Kudshabrichu Ushchinte, is seen as by the Mekubalim, as covering the entire Avodat Hashem life in Olam Hazeh. L'Shem Yichud Kudsha Brichu Shchintei. I'm dedicating this act or this mitzvah in order to unify Kudsha Brichu and Shchintei, where Kudsha Brichu refers to the Kodesh, and Shchintei, the Shechina, is where the Kodesh already meets the world of Chol, the world of Olam Hazeh. Okay, that's the difference between them. And the whole purpose here is to unify them. The unifying the world of Kodesh with the Shechina, which is Hashem's appearance in the world of Chol, is the way the Mekubalim define the entire world of Avodat Hashem. From the moment I wake up in the morning to the time I go down to sleep, Hakol. Hakol, Hakol, Hakol. People are a little more familiar. So, even more so Kabbalistic terminology, they'll talk about, for those familiar, the Yichud of Zeir Anpin and Malchut, Tiferet and Malchut. But the more simple terminology, that is L'Shem Yichud Kudsha Brichu Shchintei, that's the issue, and that covers every single day from beginning to end, and every aspect of our Avodat Hashem. In other words, these challenges don't touch upon somehow mistakes on our part or b'di'evet situations. That's what the life of a Jew in Olam Hazeh is about. Of course, from this stems a lot of hashkafic differences and arguments, always, and especially in our generation. How to juggle them? What's the proper way? What's the juggling that's proper in the eyes of Hashem between Kodesh and Chol? That underlies so many of the machlokot in religious Judaism today in general, and specifically here in Eretz Yisrael, but that's not our topic today. So I'd like to address things in terms of the big challenge, in terms of the relationship between Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippurim, the days in between, their intensity of those 10 days, and versus the rest of the year. I'd like to touch upon it, and to do that, we'll go off on a journey. We'll go along to you, and B'ezrat Hashem at the end, come back to it. And to do that, I asked Rosie to bring a whole bunch of chumashim. If everybody can have a chumash in front of it, should be enough. Okay, so we're starting off the parsha that every year takes us into Rosh Hashanah, Parshat Nitzavim. Sometimes it's Nitzavim Vayelech. We're zooming into Parshat Nitzavim, though. Parshat Nitzavim is the parsha that every single year brings us into Rosh Hashanah, in the sense that the year understands that it has to be so. There's something inherent so. It's not just that it works that way with a calendar. Many other things don't just happen to work out. One of those aspects in the year that have to be Nitzavim has to be the Shabbat, which is back to back with Rosh Hashanah. Similar vein, Parshat Dvarim, as an example, always the Shabbat that leads into Tisha B'Av. And meaning, when sources will make linkages, for example, those of you familiar, for example, in Torahs of different types of Chassidut, about finding origins of Tisha B'Av and Parshat Dvarim, that's meaning a more skeptic and critical and sarcastic eye or person will say, well, that's what he dealt with Parshat Dvarim before Tisha B'Av, so he made all kind of links. The more inherent understanding, no, there's something inherent, intrinsic about Parshat Dvarim that contains in it the roots of, the seeds of Tisha B'Av. That one has to do. When one examines it to be not too deep, one sees how true that is. Not our topic now. But same goes for Parshat Nitzavim. That's the way the Torah brings us into Rosh Hashanah. And we start off with the very opening pasuk. It's not some kind of a backdoor, backside link. It's as the Rosh Hashanah as can be. And so many Sfarim really talk about it. And it's, even if Sfarim wouldn't talk about it, it's hard to not make that link. Atem Nitzavim. Let's just start the first pasuk or two. Atem Nitzavim. Perek Kaftet. Pasuk Tet. Atem Nitzavim Hayom. כולכם לפני השם אלוקיכם, ראשיכם, שבטיכם, זקניכם ושוטריכם, כל איש ישראל, תפכם, נשיכם, וגרך אשר בקרב מחניכם, נכלתי בצלחת שואב מימיך, לא עברך בברית השם אלוקיך ובעלתו אשר השם אלוקיך קוראת עמך היום. We'll stop here. But on so many different levels, this is mamash Rosh Hashanah. There's never been such a psukim in the Torah, by the way, before. The term nitzavim specifically is interesting and unique. It does appear once or twice other than here earlier on in Torah, but not in the context of standing in front of Hashem. Interesting, why nitzavim? Why not omdim? Something to think about. But in any case, to present Klal Yisrael, you are standing now, all of you, in front of Hashem. More so, each and every one individual of you, which is really what the psukim here are saying, and this is not our topic, but if one were to ask, what is the Brit here in Parshat Nitzavim, and what is its relationship to the Brit in Parshat Kitavo, on some very basic level, that is the difference. The Brit in Kitavo that we read last Shabbat, Ele Divrei HaBrit, Asher Karat Hashem Mipnei Yisrael Ve'avot Moav, Milvad HaBrit Asher Karat Tam B'Chorev, that's referring to Brit with Klal Yisrael, similar to what we had in Har Chorev and Parshat B'Chukotai. The Brit of Nitzavim is with every single individual, with a cutting difference. And that is, the other Britot, the Chukotai and Kitavo, were Brachot and Klalot. We refer to them as such. The Gemara and Megillah also refers to them as such. The Klalot, Shebe Chukotai or Shebe Mishneh Torah. But we're not talking Brachot and Klalot and Nitzavim. That's not our topic. I just want to emphasize this. Parshat Nitzavim doesn't deal with Klalot. Parshat Nitzavim talks about to be or not to be, meaning exist or not exist, life or death, which doesn't pertain to Klal Yisrael. Am Yisrael Chai. Am Yisrael Chai, we heard it sung a lot recently, in the past 2-3 months, Baruch Hashem. Very moving situations, Baruch Hashem, over the summer. But Am Yisrael Chai, Am Yisrael is as eternal as HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. Our existence is bound together. You're eternal, we're eternal. Thanks to you, we are eternal. But individuals, Am Klal Yisrael, no guarantee. Chas v'chalila, a person can ruin his life. It's hard to say those words. A person can totally cut himself off, karet, which is what the Pesukim there are alluding to here, Parshat Nitzavim. It's within every yachid, and that's what it's saying. Each and every one of you individuals are standing today in front of Hashem, and that exactly is what Rosh Hashanah is about. More so, let's continue. Atem Nitzavim Hayom. Often in Chazal, Hayom is a term which specifically is interpreted by Chazal as referring to Rosh Hashanah. One example, the beginning of Sefer Iyov. Where we know the Bnei Elohim, all the Malachim, including the Satan, comes to stand in front of Hashem, and it starts there, Vayehi Hayom, Vayavohu Bnei Elohim Mityatzeb B'fnei Hashem, Satan B'tocham, and Hashem says to the Satan, oh, you've seen my Avdi Iyov, he's such a good person, he's such a tzaddik, isn't he? And the Satan says, yeah, but you never tested him, now let's test him. And that's what launches off the book. The point is though, Vayehi Hayom, Chazal Darshan, Rosh Hashanah. Okay? So, clearly here, I'm sure it's spoken about, Atem Nitzavim Hayom. Hayom is referring to Rosh Hashanah. And the question is, what does Hayom mean? Okay. Why does Hayom refer to Rosh Hashanah? Once in the past, I think it was a Shabbaton we had in Beit Shemesh, she spoke about Hayom, and one of our dear Talmidim, that he should have Refuah Shlema Tzli Kantor, went and did the work for me, and checked on the computer, and as I suspected, Hayom is a Sefer Devarim term. We'll get to other Sefer Devarim terms soon. But Hayom, he checked, and I think it was 80 or something appearances of the term Hayom in Sefer Devarim, as opposed to at most 20-something in some other Sefer. Maybe it was in Bamidbar. But Hayom is a term that belongs to Sefer Devarim. Very thought-provoking. In places that many times it could have said V'yadata, V'hashevot ha'ele l'vecha, ki Hashem hu Elokim, v'shamayim ima v'la'at tikach deinot. Pasuk that we're very well familiar with. What does that have to say V'yadata Hayom? A lot to think about. But in the context over here, is in the context of Rosh Hashanah, Hayom. I can think of 2 levels to address right now. First of all, Hayom in the context of Rosh Hashanah, we are judged on Rosh Hashanah Hayom, meaning who you are, who we will actually be. We're not yet there, but who we will be on Thursday, on Rosh Hashanah Hayom, you're judged, and that's spoken about. Sources speak about it. Adam Nidon, according to where he is exactly on that day. What's the depth of that? The depth of that doesn't mean that if he did Chatayim all year, and now he's in a better mood, so then I'm judging you only about today, and whatever it was, and I avoid it. That's not Judaism. Maybe it starts moving towards the Sheker of Christianity. The meaning of the fact that I'm judging you today, the depth of it is, Kol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtavim. I think always b'sefer as that which is between our 2 ears, and that is our brain. Which we know today physiologically, everything that we ever do, every response, everything we feel has some kind of a biochemical effect on the brain. That's the book. Why think of the book in some other world? Here, the book is here. I shape my brain. I shape myself. Every response, whether it's a good one or the chalila, the opposite, to my wife or to anybody, makes its registration. And affects me, everything that I was involved with, to the good and to the opposite, Chalila, between last Rosh Hashanah and this Rosh Hashanah, is the sum total of who I am today. I judge you today, but you are a written book of everything you ever went through. But specifically in terms of this year, the difference between the last Rosh Hashanah and this Rosh Hashanah is the sum total of everything you experience, and it's registered in you. And that doesn't have anywhere to escape. It's registered. Again, this would be true also in other generations. Today, with the modern knowledge of neurology, it makes it even more intense to think about it in that way. It makes it much more real. It's here. You can't avoid it. It's all written. That's where the beauty of tshuva comes in. A person did bad things during the year. And early on in the year, he did tshuva, didn't wait for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Often people say, it's Alumni, I'm speaking Lashon Hara. I can't, look at how serious is that? I find that ridiculous. So, because it's in the month of Iyar, Cheshvan, it's more okay to say, like, what does that mean? It's true that it says one should be more makpid on all kind of things, that he's not makpid during the year, during Sefer Yom Tshuva, but to say it in the reverse way, that, it's saying Lashon Hara, what are we talking about? What does it matter what time of the year it is? And it's registered for eternity, unless you delete it, unless you really change. And if you really change, it's not going to be there registered in you. That's a special chesed of tshuva, Hashem. We can delete from our brain or from wherever it is in us, this world, upper world, that which is registered. But then, I'm judged today, hayom. That's level 1. And another level, hayom, to think about it in the context of hayom, behei hayediyah, meaning the day, not just any day, the day. What does it mean, the day? It's not just another day. And for years, it's already on my mind. That is, Rosh Hashanah is not just another day. Even though externally, from an Olam Hazeh view, the sun rises, the sun sets, the birds sing, and whatever happens on Rosh Hashanah, externally, when you step outside of the Torah Yosef Beis Medrash, for me or anybody in his shul, it seems like it's just another day. But that's only from an Olam Hazeh perspective. Rosh Hashanah doesn't take place in Olam Hazeh. Rosh Hashanah takes place in a plane which is higher than Olam Hazeh. And in that place, it's not just another day. Rosh Hashanah is the day which is the womb for all the days of the coming year. That means it's a day that includes all the future days, all future 354 and a half days of the coming year is included in this day. So it's a much heavier day. It's a day that contains 354 and a half days in it. Now this is already somewhat touching upon and calls for a reflection for a Hidbonut, which is relevant to what to the practical level that we started off with. And that is, the truth of the matter is, let's just take, I don't know, Kaf Daled Tevet. Chose Kaf Daled Tevet. In the middle of the winter, it's cold outside, I'm busy, it's as routine as could be in the middle of the winter. If I totally suffer from that like anybody else, but if I, Amos Luban, Kaf Daled Tevet, I'm not aware of Rosh Hashanah on that date, there's an element of sheker to that existence of that day. I'm saying it a little in an extreme way, but I think it's true. Why? Because the truth of the matter is, Kaf Daled Tevet, just like Kaf Hey Tevet or Kaf Gimel Tevet, and any other day of the year, was already present this past Rosh Hashanah. It was defined as to what will be on this day, what will come my way, what will test me, all the days, in terms of my deen, were determined on Rosh Hashanah. Of course, contingent upon the changes that will take place between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But Rosh Hashanah / Yom Kippur contains all the days of the coming year. Therefore, Kaf Daled Tevet, on a potential level, was there already, was conceived. The seeds for the day were defined on Rosh Hashanah. That means that if I live Kaf Daled Tevet and I didn't think at all of Rosh Hashanah, there's an aspect of Alma de Shikra, there's an aspect of Sheker to the way I lived Kaf Daled Tevet. Which means, on some level, one should ideally expect himself to remain on some level in the background of his thoughts, the consciousness of Rosh Hashanah every single day of the coming year. And to the extent that he does that, there is an element of emet, which is really the underlying theme and definition of this day, we'll see later on, that's pouring onto the entirety of the entire year with all the days that make that up. Okay? And again, it sounds extreme, it sounds intense. I will agree with anybody who will say, I heard in the name of Rav Katz, he said the same thing, it's not shy to be in Rosh Hashanah state of mind the whole year. It's not right to expect it from oneself, and life also demands from you other things. Rosh Hashanah, we spend the whole day in shul, davening. If one were to do that whole year round, he won't have children. Parnasai won't have Bani, Chayim, Mizone, everything, it just won't be. Life in Olam Hazeh demands other things. But how much is your mind connected to Rosh Hashanah every single day of the year? That's a tremendous amount of internal work. Tremendous. And every single day, further in the year, it's a bigger challenge because you're going farther and farther and farther and farther away from Rosh Hashanah. People have to find the internal techniques, tactics, strategies to how to do it. Maybe every Rosh Chodesh to make it, an avoda to go back into Rosh Hashanah. There were years I haven't been managing to do it in recent years. Every Erev Rosh Chodesh, Yom Kippur Katan, I would try to be present at such a tefillah. When you're in yeshiva, it's a little difficult to teach them, but it takes you back into Yom Kippur. At least Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Seder, but Yamim Noraim, at least once a month you return to that place. Every person needs to find ways to take Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for the rest of the year. And that already sounds like so corny, I know. And I hate saying corny things, like many of us. But again, otherwise, there's an b'china shel sheker shenimtza b'kol yom v'yom sheni lo chashav al Rosh Hashanah. And in his own way, the Rambam says it in a beautiful way, in those famous words of the Rambam, that everybody knows, and that is in Hilchot Shuvah, he talks about Tkiyat Shofar. אף על פי שתקיעת שופר בראש השנה גזירת הכתוב היא, אף על פי כן רמז יש בו, כלומר הוא ישנים משנתכם, etc. etc. אלו השוכחים את האמת בהבלי הזמן. אלו השוכחים את האמת בהבלי הזמן. It's referring to all those, that's all of us, who forget the emet in the vanity of time. Rosh Hashanah is Yom HaEmet. That's so much that one can think about in terms of what that means. We'll touch upon it a little later on. What does that mean? How do I know that? When we say, Rabbi talks about it in Kachad Yitzchak and Rosh Hashanah, V'taher libeinu lovdecha bemet, we say in every Shabbat and every Moed. When it comes to Rosh Hashanah, we finish it in a unique way that we don't in any other Moed. V'taher libeinu lovdecha bemet, ki ata Elohim emet, udvarcha emet, v'kayam la'ad. Baruch ata Hashem mekadesh Yisrael v'yom zikaron. Right, that's the way we finish it. We don't say that in Shabbat. There's one more bakasha that we have as well as others. Etc. But when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, the request for Teli Bein of the Emet is in a totally different context. It's because today is the day of the revelation of the Emet. This is Yom HaEmet. Let's continue. Before taking any step forward, let's, in the army they call it, Dani and some others here, well no, Yishul Kav. What's a Yishul Kav? Yishul Kav means that before you start shooting, everybody needs to be in the same line. I like using that term a lot. Let's all be in the same line before moving forward. And in what sense should we all be in the same line? In terms of understanding, where there's so much lack of understanding, and so much misconception in terms of, it's a typical question also, the relationship between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The beginning and the end of the start to Tshuva. Let's address it for 2 minutes before we move on, so that we're all on the same page. And that is the classic question often asked: shouldn't it be the other way around? Yom Kippur should come first clean slate from last year, and then start a new year. And it's not; it's the opposite way. And that's a question that can be addressed in so many levels. But anybody who does not address that question is not really dealing with start to Tshuva. If a person says to himself, Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, more or less the same thing, Yemei Adin, Yamim Noraim, just the beginning and the end. It's shallow. And how do we know this? We all know this. You open up the Nafsa for Rosh Hashanah, and you open up the Nafsa for Yom Kippur, it's two new worlds. There are elements that continue, but the Maaseh, it's two worlds. The main focus is different. Vidui, Chataim, Tshuva, Yud Gimel Midot Shel Rechamim. All that which is so, rightly so, deeply associated in our minds with the Aseret Yemei Tshuva doesn't appear at all in the core tefillah of Rosh Hashanah. Not our chataim, not me, not vidui, not tshuva. That's not spoken at all about. What is spoken about is, again, the bracha of the day, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoteinu, Melo chal kol ha'olam kulo b'chvodecha, v'yinaseh al kol ha'aretz b'ikarecha, v'ofa v'hadar ge'on uzecha al kol yoshvei tevel artzecha, וידע כל פעול כי אתה פעלתו, ויבין כל יצור כי אתה יצרתו, ויאמר כל אשר נשמה באפו, השם אלוקי ישראל מלך מלכותו בכל משל. And now we go on, קדשנו במצוותיך, until we get to that finishing that I mentioned. There's no talk of any of those terms, which is weird because it's the first day of Aseret Yemei Tshuva, but we're not addressing Tshuva at all. And to the extent that we think of Rosh Hashanah in the context of Yom Kippurim and its concept, we're off. We're just totally off. How does one understand it? I can only share my understanding. I'm sure it's so many different levels that one can address. It can take it to so many different directions. My understanding of it is as such. I'll say it a little in a harsh way. He who on Rosh Hashanah is still busy with his chatayim and himself and his tshuva, that means that's megala, that his tshuva is egocentric. That means that he needs to come out this year at tzaddik in his own eyes and in front of Hashem's eyes. Rosh Hashanah says, no. Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the tshuva par excellence. Tshuva is relevant all year. אבל יש 10 ימים שהם מגדירים את התשובה. How does tshuva work for a Jew? It begins with Rosh Hashanah, it ends with Yom Kippurim. It begins with you are expected to forget about yourself. Why do I say that? Because it doesn't speak at all about us. It talks about God, and it talks about His world. Why? Because what is Rosh Hashanah about, historically? The return to creation. And therefore, what it discusses is the vision of God when He created the world. And we dive in together with Him that at last, now that we came back annually to the day of creation, to the womb of creation, to dive in with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that at last His vision should be fulfilled after all these thousands of years. That's all that it's about. The issue is not you. The issue is God and His world. If a person is unable to think outside the box of his chatayim and his tshuva, he's not. Rosh Hashanah he didn't do. He did Yom Kippur twice, but it means that his tshuva is about himself. He has to come with a good mark. Somebody recently gave a sikha here for preparation for Rosh Hashanah in terms of etzot ketzali natzel minadim. I can't relate to that. That's what Rosh Hashanah is about. That's not what Rosh Hashanah is about. You want to be nitzal minadin? Think of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in His world. Not that we don't address ourselves. Of course we address ourselves. But the day after Rosh Hashanah, you start moving towards Yom Kippur. Once you have redefined, refreshed, and rewired yourself in terms of Yesodot HaEmunah, of what's this world about, why was it created, for what purpose, then you can start moving towards individually how much of my life is proper or correct, connected to that purpose. Where do I fit into God's master plan? Where do I fit into Tachlit HaBriyah? Yes, Rosh Hashanah demands to think big. So big that one day is not enough. That's always my experience. You need 2 days for Rosh Hashanah. The issue is just too deep. It's too big. You'll ask me on the biggest day of the year, people go to the stars from Rosh Hashanah. Anyway, I once asked a couple of years ago, guys were starting to be interested here, so I asked I asked him a few weeks before, see if he gives me. Look, you're asking me about such things. I need to know. Is it proper for me to get up and explicitly talk against it? Because guys were starting to talk about it, to do it. So I love this answer. He says, teach them good da'at all year round, so that then they reach on their own the conclusion. If you give healthy Torah all year round, you don't become a Meshuggah Jew. This concept of, the truth is, forgetting of oneself, I owe, actually, to Rosh Shlomo Carlebach, give him that credit. In a few different books I read, that when he was, everybody knows he was an upcoming, really thinking in terms of becoming a Gadol B'Torah in Lakewood, learning by the greatest Rosh Yeshiva. But he also had a connection with the Lubavitch Rebbe, who invited him one day and asked him to start doing work for him on the university campuses. Not there wasn't such a thing. He was going to be the first one to start doing here on the campuses. So he said, Lubavitch Rebbe, I'm just mamash in the midst of my learning, in the midst of the Ritva and the Rashba, and I'm just starting now, launching off to become a Talmid Chacham. So he said to the Lubavitch Rebbe, said, forget a little about yourself. That's it. And that, he said, gave him a whole wave of energy. And he did. In the beginning, he worked for him, and then he became independent. He detached himself from Torah. But I once shared this with a friend of mine. And he said, זה לא בשביל כל אחד, and I disagree with him. כל אחד ואחד צריך למצוא בו את המקום שתשכח קצת מעצמך. In many different ways. חלילה וחס זה ישנה לי. Not every person should leave the kollel to go and do kiruv. Of course not. But in each person, in his own way, has to find some element of tishkach matzmachai. For me, that's what Rosh Hashanah is about. It's not about you, it's about him. If a person is unable to do that, then he's too wrapped up in himself. It's not about you, it's about the world. It's about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his vision. Klal Yisrael. Rosh Hashanah demands from a Jew to think big, because that's what Jews are about. A person thinks about himself and his own cheshbonot. Rosh Hashanah, he didn't do. I think I mentioned it last year. An avrech came to me in the past couple of years here in Yeshiva, and he asked me, Rosh Hashanah is about to come. I spoke to you also last year about it. He said to me, I didn't remember about that 2 years ago. I'm all pressured. I can't go into it with calmness. I told him, look, I don't know. I can only tell you what the first thought that's going through my mind. You're too wrapped up about yourself and your issues. Just go to Rosh Hashanah for what it is, and not forget about yourself. That's Rosh Hashanah. He came back to me after Rosh Hashanah and says, thank you very much. I totally changed my Rosh Hashanah. It's not me, it's the machzor of Rosh Hashanah. So what is the person has to go through that, go through the machzor a little bit, a couple of days before Rosh Hashanah. One sees what the day is about. It's not about me, it's about him. Let's go back into Parshat Nitzavim, but let's skip from the beginning to the end. The last piece of Parshat Nitzavim, this is where Torah becomes as intense as can be. I always sense that Torah, as it progresses forward, is more intense, more intense. It comes to Sefer Dvarim, a totally new level of intensity. Concepts, terms, which never appeared before, and so many different levels of Avodat Hashem. One can elaborate a lot in it, but we're not learning Sefer Dvarim right now. And then comes Parshat Nitzavim, Kitavot, the truth is, and then Nitzavim, and I think we reach a peak over here. And the peak is at the very closing paragraph of Parshat Nitzavim. נא להסתכל בפנים in your Chumashim, פרק ל', פסוק ט"ו, פרק ל', פסוק ט"ו. In some Sidurim it's printed after Shafris, some people say it every day, called Parashat HaBechira. Interestingly enough, the piece just before was also printed in Sidurim, that Perek Lamed, Pasuk Aleph till Yud, and that is Parashat HaTshuva. We know how deeply they're related. Touch upon it in a moment. How deeply the Rambam relates them. But פרשת הבחירה. פרשת הבחירה, פרק ל', פסוק ט"ו, אני קורא בפנים. Check the relevance to Rosh Hashanah. ראה נתתי לפניך היום. This again, היום, right? It didn't have to be there. No, היום. ראה נתתי לפניך היום. את החיים ואת הטוב, ואת המוות ואת הרע. You may remember, Parshat Re'eh started off in a similar manner, but it doesn't talk there about that. It talks about bracha v'klala. Not chayim and tov and mavet and ra. Bracha v'klala. But we already addressed it. This parsha is dealing already on a more next stage, on an existential level, to be or not to be, not the quality of the givens in my life, to exist or not. And that's what it appears here again. ראה נתתי לפניך היום את החיים ואת הטוב ואת המוות ואת הרע. אשר אנוכי מצווך היום לאהבה את השם אלוקיך, ללכת בדרכיו ולשמור מצוותיו וחוקותיו ומשפטיו, וחיית ורבית. וברכך השם אלוקיך בארץ אשר אתה בא שמה לרשתה. ואם יפנה לבבך ולא תשמע, ונידחת והשתחווית לאלוהים אחרים ועבדתם. הגדתי לכם היום כי אבות תאבדון, לא תאריכו ימים על האדמה אשר אתה עובר את הירדן לבוא שמה לרשתה. העידותי בכם היום את השמיים ואת הארץ. החיים והמוות נתתי לפניך, הברכה והקללה, ובחרת בחיים, למען תחיה אתה וזרעך. לאהבה את השם אלוקיך, לשמוע בקולו, דווקא בו, כי הוא חייך ואורך ימיך, לשבת על האדמה אשר נשבע השם לאבותיך לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב לתת להם. Again, going back to פסוק י"ט, please, repeating it another time. העידותי בכם היום, פסוק י"ט, את השמיים ואת הארץ. החיים והמוות נתתי לפניך, הברכה והקללה, I beg you, ובחרת בחיים, למען תחיה אתה וזרעך. The most basic foundation, at least according to the Rambam and the Chot Tshuva, and we, I think, all know this, the foundation of all life of Torah and mitzvot here in Olam Hazeh, the Amud that it all stands on, says the Rambam, in the center of Ilchot Tshuva, Parakim 5 ו-6, in the middle of the famous 10 Parakim of Ilchot Tshuva. in the center of it. The Rambam is the master of organization and classification. Everything, the way he positions it, is clearly well thought out. In Perek Chamishi v'Shishi, in the centerpiece of Hilchot Tshuva, he presents the yesod that the whole Torah stands on, and that is the yesod of Bechira, Bechira Chofshit, freedom of choice. That's what it all stands on. The Torah never mentioned the term of having to make a choice as defining who we are. Ad etzem hayom hazeh, ad here at Parshat Nitzavim. Correct me if I'm wrong. You'll tell me what do you mean. The Torah is constantly been talking about there's two ways in front of you. Parshat B'chukot, at the end of Vayikra. If you follow the ways of it's true. They didn't use the term B'chira. And it's, if you want to say, it's just semantics. I don't accept it. It's not just, the Torah's never stopped semantics. The term B'chira, in the sense of having to make a choice between, not just between life and death, even between bracha and klal was not presented. But it wasn't presented that you have to make a bechira between them, and that was not mentioned. Never before. Only here. At the closure of the Torah, that's where it's mentioned. I find it very interesting. Now, if we're already talking about Sefer Dvarim and the concept of bechira, I checked. I had a deep sense, and I don't know how to do it on the computer. I did it with the ancient way of opening the connotation. And indeed, in fact, the number of times that the sharish bachal, bet chet reish, choice, different forms, appears twice in Bereshit, 3 times in Shemot, 0 times in Vayikra, 3 times in Bamidbar, and 31, if I counted correctly, in Sefer Devarim. So it's totally out of proportion. But what's unique is what happens in Sefer Devarim. Only here do we actually talk about man having to make bechira. What I find astonishing is what Sefer Devarim, all those times that it mentions, 34 at one times, that it talks about bechira, it's in the context of HaKadosh Baruch Hu making bechira. Hamakom asher yivchar Hashem. Back in Parsha Re'eh, when we contrasted Avodat Hashem with Avodah Zarah, Avodah Zarah are people who worship God, their gods, every mountain, every hill, tachat kol etz ra'anan. And you have to go up to Hamakom asher yivchar Hashem, the place that Hashem will choose. Hashem reveals himself in Sefer Devarim, and only here, as a Baal Bechira. An interesting concept. What does it mean, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has Bechira? A human being has Bechira, between Tov and between Ra. The concept that we're Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, you won't find it in any other Chumash. Not even in Shemot. It doesn't say that at Har Sinai. It says it in Sefer Devarim. Over and over. He chose us over the other nations, he chose our forefathers. Od pam ve'od pam. Musag she'HaKadosh Baruch Hu bocher lanu ze rak beSefer Devarim. I define, based on that, for myself, Sefer Devarim as Sefer HaBechira. Similar to the way the Rambam talks about Beit HaMikdash, which only appears in Sefer Devarim, of course, right? It doesn't appear in any other Chumash. The Mishkan, yes. Beit HaMikdash, no. Makom asher yivchar Hashem for the first time, Parsha Re'eh. Beit HaBechira, for me, Sefer Devarim is Sefer HaBechira. The peak of Sefer HaBechira is when it's handed over to us. You need to do Bechira, just like I do Bechira, you have to do Bechira. Clearly, כשאני בוחר והקדוש ברוך הוא בוחר, זה לא אותו דבר. One has to delve into that and try to understand it. We'll touch upon it in a moment. But clearly, Parshat HaBechira, and it closes Parshat Nitzavim, and takes us into Rosh Hashana. Rosh Hashana is the day that annually takes us back to the day that Adam was made, and on the same very day of Rosh Hashana, Adam was faced with Etz Hadat Tovera, and internalized it, and entered into a world of Tov and Ra. In the same 6th day of creation, part of the creation process, Adam ate from Etz Hadat. It's a chet on the one hand, but it's an entering into the world where Tov and Ra have been internalized. And now he is, for the first time, a Ben Bechira. Rosh Hashana is the birthday of Bechira. Ha'adam kebocher notzar b'Rosh Hashana. Rosh Hashana is the day where we return to the conception of Bechira. Eating from Etz Hadat Tovera, listen carefully please, means I am in that space, Dafka using this terminology, I am in that empty space between Tov and Ra, and then that empty space between Tov and Ra, that's where I become a Baal Bechira. And only in that empty space do I become a Baal Bechira. And as Rav Hurtner writes very beautifully in the name of one of the Gedolim of the previous generations, he says, anybody who's never been in that place, in that empty space between Tov and Ra, does not know the essence of who he is. Because that is the place of Bechira, that's who he is. Or, to phrase it differently, it's an important rephrasing. Instead of talking as me, on Rosh Hashanah, being formed as a Baal Bechira, I can talk about it as being formed as a Baal Ratzon. Ratzon and Bechira, because in English we'll say free will, right? Ratzon and Bechira is the same thing. It's a different way of saying it. In fact, that's what I understand in terms of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Is Beta Bechira, Beit HaMikdash is defined by the Rambam, based on the Psukim in Parshat Oreh, as Beta Bechira, Hamakom Asher Yivchar Hashem, that's the house where Hashem's will appears in the world, or Hashem's will meets the world. זה לא המקום שבו הקדוש ברוך הוא צריך לבחור בין לבין. זה המקום שבו הקדוש ברוך הוא מתגלה כבוחר, מתגלה כרוצה, כבעל רצון. אני בעל רצון, אומר הקדוש ברוך הוא. אני מצפה ממך גם להיות בעל רצון. And in the most profound level, to be Mekayim, another concept that appears only in Sefer Dvarim, and that is V'alachta bidrachav, to emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It did not appear in any other Chumash. We were made b'tzelem Elokim, but there was no chiyuv that stemmed from that. Sefer Dvarim over and over and over again. V'alachta bidrachav, v'alachta bidrachav. On the most profound level, deeper than the midot that we have to emulate about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to be a Baal Ratzon. I'm a Baal Ratzon, I expect you to be a Baal Ratzon. I'm a Baal Bechira, I expect you to be a Baal Bechira. But it only comes as the ending of the entire Sefer Devarim, as the ending of the entire Torah. It's like the end of Torah wraps itself up together with the beginning of Torah. Parshat Bereshit with Parshat Nitzavim. All bringing us into Rosh Hashanah, the day that formed me as a Ben Bechira, as a Baal Ratzon. And when one reflects upon it, I believe, Laniv Dati, this is the heart of what Rosh Hashanah is about. This is what makes it so intense. Think about it. Rosh Hashanah is not just the day of the birth of my will. Rosh Hashanah is the day where Hashem's will was born, comes into the world. Why? Because we said earlier, what is Rosh Hashanah? Returning to the day of creation. Or returning to the vision of creation. Now we'll say it deeper. Returning to the day of the will behind creation. Behind all of creation stands a will. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ratza Bachar Ratza Livro Olam. Kol HaMashma'ut Shel Briyat HaOlam, as opposed to the Greek view that ruled over the world of science till really recently. HaOlam Kadmon Chalila V'chas from such thoughts. That means that the world is not predicated on any will. The world was always there. When you view the point of Bereshit as the beginning of it all, that means that there was a point of beginning. That means that there's a conscious will, not just thought, deeper will, to bring a world to existence. When I say deeper, Chabad develops this concept a lot. That whether it's regarding HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whether it's regarding us, we're made up of different chambers, deepest one being the Ratzon, which dresses up in machshava, dresses up in dibur, and dresses up in maaseh. Ratzon, machshava, dibur, maaseh. But the most profound chamber in me, that's the essence of who I am, it's the core of who I am, is my Ratzon. Therefore, Rosh Hashanah is the day where we return to the birth of my Ratzon. I can rewire my Ratzon on this day, therefore. I can change my essence in terms of my Ratzon. And that's the beginning of a tshuva process. Because all my behavior and all my midot are going to be branches that branch off from there. So the day of Rosh Hashanah is the day where we return to the birth of our Ratzon. It's the birth of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon. And therefore the depth of Rosh Hashanah it's the merging of my Ratzon with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon on the day that this Ratzon Eloki came into the world. And that's what makes this day so intense. Because there's nothing that can make a person closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu than the fact that we share the same, not just vision, we share the same will. You hear the difference between the two. It's more profound. We share the same wish, the same ratzon, Now people may hear this and say, nice words, that's above me, it's beyond me, I'm not holding there. Wrong! Everybody in this room, anybody who has some taste of Kodesh, and somewhat connected to Torah mitzvot, even people on much lower levels than the person who's sitting here, people sitting here in this room. It's not true. Why? Because what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will consist of? It's much more simple. The truth is very simple. The truth is very simple. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu want from his world? What's his vision? That the world should just be a place where people are nice to each other and behave with patience with each other and respect each other and give space to each other and don't look down on another and are not jealous of each other and don't run after kavod and don't run after their own selfish desires. That's all that I want. That the way I behave at my world should behave as well. A world which is clean and sensitive and all the things that we would most want in our own home. That everything is pleasant. Should be the ways of the world. People should not walk around the world cutting people's heads off. People should not hate others for just being different or dressing different. Outside of Klaisel, for sure. Inside of Klaisel, we don't want any of that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't want any of that. It's not these are not far-fetched visions. Ki karov elecha davar me'od. Our own parsha Nitzavim. Ki karov elecha davar me'od beficha u'bilbavcha la'asoto. It's very close to you. It's the things that you most want for you and for your family that you ask for on Rosh Hashana. When you give a genuine bracha to your family in Rosh Hashana, that's what you want from that. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. Just good. Shiyeh tov. Zeh kol. For everybody. And the more of an Adam Gadol you are internally, Adam Gadol is not measured in his position. Adam Gadol is between him and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. ככל שאדם גדול יותר, אכפת לו מיותר ויותר אנשים, והself שלו גדל וגדל and expands. Ultimately, that's what he wants for all Klal Yisrael. You know what? For all mankind. For all the good people in mankind. For sure. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from all mankind. That's what he envisioned. That's what he wants. That's what I want. And that's what we all want. It's not so far out. One doesn't have to go into abstract concepts and Kabbalah for this. The truth is so much more simple. Simple, that doesn't, not in a negative sense, it's simple in the true sense. Emet mod pshuta. And the truth of the matter is, thinking of Rosh Hashanah in that context, it's the day of the great Ratzon. Whether it's manifesting into Hashem's Ratzon or my Ratzon, a sensitive ear hears it, and the very definition the Torah provides it. What's the Torah definition for the day? Not Rosh Hashanah, not Yom Adin, not Briyat Olam, nothing. Kol ma shekatuv Yom Teruah yeh lachem, or Yom Zichron Teruah. Zeh hakol. Rabbeinu Bechaya goes and elaborates on the fact that why does the Torah not elaborate at all on this day? It doesn't say anything. It says Yom Teruah. A sensitive ear hears the word Teruah. Sounds very similar to a word in the daughter language of Lashon HaKodesh Aramit. Ra'ava. Ma ze Ra'ava? Yeh Ra'ava kadamach? Ratzon, will. And the things, it's brought down. כתוב, אני לא זוכר כבר איפה ראיתי over the years. I'm sure it's written in places, חסידות for sure. יום תרועה, יהיה לכם יום תרועה, יום הרצון. So I'm familiar with that already for a few years. Yom Teruah is Yom HaRatzon. But I was always bothered that it seems that two different meanings that don't meet. Yom Teruah, in a simple sense, the day of the blowing of the shofar, Teruah b'shofar, Yom Tekiah. Mitzad echad, mitzad sheni, we see all the depth behind it, but that it also means something else completely, and that is Yom HaRatzon. Ma lekol hashofar v'laratzon. And this year I feel I have a little more of a time and a little more of an understanding. And for that, we have to wrap up. But if you quickly go together with me back to earlier parts of Sefer Devarim, to the very, very, very beginning of Sefer Devarim, to Perek Aleph Pasuk Lamed Daled, Sefer Devarim, Perek Aleph Pasuk Lamed Daled. פרק א', פסוק ל"ד. We revisit Chetem HaRaglim in Parshat Devarim. That's the link to Tisha B'Av. I mentioned earlier. It says there, when Hashem heard what you said, but it doesn't say that. What does it say? Vayishma Hashem et, not et divrechem. It says Vayishma Hashem et kol divrechem. ויקצוף וישבע לאמור. מה זה וישמע את דבריכם? מה זה וישמע את כל דבריכם? Then Hashem said, when he heard kol divrechem, he says, they're not coming into Eretz Yisrael. What's not good enough about, I heard their words. What were their words? Terribly harsh words. Earlier on, a few psukim earlier, Hashem hates us and that's why he took us out of Mitzrayim. V'shinat Hashem odanu. He took us out of Mitzrayim. That's not enough for Hashem to hear and to say this generation is not going in. No. It's not V'yishma divrechem. It's kol divrechem. The voice of your words. What's the difference between the words and the voice of your words? It seems like an unnecessary term. It appears again. By the way, Parsha Shlach, it doesn't say that. But here, when we address it 40 years later, we do say that. Kol divrechem. Similar manner, but this time in a positive note. When we revisit Matan Torah, open up again one more pasuk. Perek Hey pasuk Kaf Hey. We'll wrap up. Perek Hey pasuk Kaf Hey. Perek Hey pasuk Kaf Hey. When we revisit Matan Torah. And we say to Moshe Rabbeinu, you don't speak to, we can't deal with the fact that Hashem is speaking to us directly. You speak to us. And Hashem responds, says, that's good. Perek Hey, pasuk Kaf Hey. Vayishma Hashem et kol divrechem, the same term. Vayibedabrechem alai. ויאמר השם עלי, שמעתי את כל דברי העם הזה. It could have said, שמעתי את דברי העם הזה. No, שמעתי את כל דברי העם הזה. אשר דיברו אליך. היטיבו את כל אשר דיבר. What's the difference between לשמוע את כל הדברים versus לשמוע את הדברים? The difference is, if my wife says, Amos, do you mind doing the dishes? And I'll say, yes. Or, Amos, do you mind doing the dishes? Yes. הכל, kuf, משנה את הכל. Kaf, right? It's all the difference in the world. Much more than what you say, it's how you say that. The tone of the voice is more profound and more internal than the actual words themselves. The words deal with specific details of what you want to say. But where you're holding, what's your real mindset, your voice, the tone says that. One can elaborate a lot on this. That's so much that what the world of music is about. And there's an interesting meeting point. Sometimes music will be without lyrics, without words, and sometimes with. So B'Kodesh, sometimes a nigun, and sometimes nigun with a pasuk. It's a different experience. Often we'll move on from a nigun with the words to just a nigun alone. It's a higher place, not limited by the words, not committed to the words, hovering already into a higher place. We'll finish with the following, and this is summing up of it. Just imagine, I try to do it sometimes. Imagine you meet with HaKadosh Baruch Hu one-on-one. Now we should sit in the room with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not going to discuss whether you're allowed to visualize him or not. It's just a diyun b'rishon. But you're sitting in a room, you get to meet with HaKadosh Baruch Hu for half an hour. He says, my son, pour your heart. Whatever you want. But mamash, try to go into that place. If you can't do it right now, do it some other time. Go to the kotel afterwards, do it. Whatever you ask, ad chatzia malchut. Chadima. Pour out your deepest wishes. You'll talk about this and this and this and that. But then will come the next stage. That when you'll say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please, what will ultimately come out are not words. It will be a roar. Tzaka, ayuma. And what is that tzaka ayuma? What is that terrible scream? It's not the specifics. It's how much you want it. And I chop from that, Yom Teruah being Yom HaRatzon, it's not two different shots. It's one. Because when I speak words, the words are the expression of my thoughts. When I scream with a sound, with a voice, with a call, it's not my thoughts speaking, it's my will which is speaking. Hakol medaber derech tza'aka. V'zeh kol hashofar. Yom Teruah, as we've spoken about, it being Yom HaRatzon. By the way, look in Tuat Melech Bo, the Parshat Balak. You'll see how Rashi brings that out, that concept. Milashon Ra'ava, Ratzon, and Kol Yom Teruah, Milashon Kol HaShofar. Kol HaShofar is the big scream, on so many different levels. That's the scream that we scream when we face the truth. The Olam HaEmet, which once a year we go into that place. Once a year we go into Olam HaEmet. As we said, that's the request for V'tayar Libeinu L'Avdecha B'Emet and Rosh Hashana. The difference from many other days, we said in the name of Rav Lichter. Once a year we go into Olam HaEmet. In an Olam HaEmet, there's no place for words, it's a place for a scream. And that scream, and we'll really finish with that, just wrap up to the beginning of what we spoke about, you can't be in that intense place of that scream. Can there be a kol shofar and people don't tremble? If a person is somewhat in touch with himself, and with the kol shofar, he trembles. Charada. That charada is the charada of standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, in front of the truth. And every single time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself appears, it comes with the kol shofar. The Sinai and other places. You can't be there all year round. That's true. It's too intense. It doesn't allow you to do other things. But it can continue resonating and sounding there in the background of every single day. Because every single day, as we said, was there already in Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah defines all the coming days. If a person were to try to have even 5 seconds of a thought of Rosh Hashanah, to remember, I'm busy with the days, whatever I'm busy with now. Good things, hopefully good things. But underneath all the many layers of my words and my deeds, there is the same kol shofar, the same zakah, which is screaming out on the most simple and the most intense existential level, is still screaming every single day. If a person were to give it 5 seconds a day, it will put his entire day, his entire life, and his entire year in a different context, in a really different context. שנזכה כולנו לשנה טובה, מתוקה, כתיבה וחתירה טובה, לנו ולכל כלל ישראל.